My younger brother used a rock to smash the $15,000 Honda Civic I just bought for my daughter. The sound of breaking glass, the metal getting scratched up, the image of my daughter standing there crying her heart out in my parents' yard. It's all still burned into my mind like it happened yesterday. Why did my brother do that? And how did my family react when they witnessed that scene? Let's dive into the story. Before we get into the details, let me send my heartfelt thanks to you. Thank you for taking your valuable time to listen to the story. Hello everyone. I'm Daniel, 45 years old. I'm a senior software engineer at a tech company in Sacramento, California. The story I'm telling today happened during Christmas 2 years ago, and even now, every time I think back on it, I still feel emotions welling up inside me. Maybe it's anger that's cooled down over time, or perhaps it's sadness over a family relationship that's been broken forever. That day was December 24th, Christmas Eve. My family went back to my parents' house in Stockton for the traditional Christmas party like every year. My parents had invited about 20 people, including close and distant relatives and a few close neighbors. Around 3 in the afternoon, my wife and I drove from Sacramento to Stockton. My daughter Anna, who was only 16 at the time, drove the 2018 Honda Civic behind our car. I had just bought her that car 2 months earlier for nearly $15,000 so she'd have transportation for school. The car wasn't fancy or expensive, but it was Anna's first car. She loved it like a treasure. Every weekend, Anna would spend time carefully washing and maintaining the vehicle. She even named it Silver because of the shiny silver paint. Throughout the drive, I'd occasionally look in the rearview mirror to check whether Anna was keeping up. She drove very carefully, always keeping a safe distance behind us. Seeing my daughter confidently behind the wheel like that, I felt so proud. On the way there, my wife Sarah talked about the gifts she had prepared for my parents. The atmosphere in the car was warm and cheerful. I had no idea that in just a few hours, that joy would be crushed so cruelly. Around 5 in the afternoon, we arrived at my parents' house. I parked in front of the yard, and Anna had just parked her Honda Civic right behind me. She got out with a bright smile and ran into the house to greet Grandpa and Grandma. At that moment, Mom was standing at the door, her face lighting up when she saw us. She hugged Anna tightly, her voice full of love as she said to Anna, "Here's my granddaughter. I missed you so much. Are you doing well? How's school going?" Anna smiled brightly and answered Grandma with an excited voice. "I'm doing great. I just finished my semester exams. Got really high grades, Grandma." Dad also stepped out from the living room at that moment. He smiled and nodded to greet me, then gently patted Anna's head. He was a serious man who rarely showed emotions, but with Anna, he always gave the most loving gestures. Going inside the house, I saw that some relatives had already arrived. I saw Aunt Linda, Mom's younger sister, chatting with Uncle Harold. A few neighbors were also there, sitting around the table, helping Mom prepare food. And then I saw my younger brother, Brian. He was standing in the corner of the living room, holding a glass of wine, talking to his wife, Lisa. Next to them was Alex, Brian's son, a 13-year-old kid with bleached blonde hair and a face that always looked arrogant. When he saw me, Brian just nodded briefly and turned back to his conversation. Brian is 2 years younger than I am. He currently owns a small electronics store in Modesto. His business isn't bad, but Brian always brags and compares himself to others. The new Mercedes, worth nearly $70,000, parked outside was the most evident proof of that. Right from the moment I saw Anna's Honda Civic parked next to Brian's Mercedes, I had a bad feeling. Brian's eyes swept over Anna's car with a look of disdain, while Alex stared at it with strange curiosity. The Christmas dinner started around 6 in the evening. Mom had prepared a lavish feast with roasted turkey, mashed potatoes, Caesar salad, garlic bread, and lots of other traditional dishes. The delicious smell of food wafted through the house, mingling with the lively chatter and laughter of the guests. For the first hour or so, everything went really well. I sat next to my wife, chatting with relatives I hadn't seen in a long time. Anna sat at a table with some younger cousins, telling them about school and her extracurricular activities. I noticed Alex, Brian's son, kept looking over at Anna with curious eyes. That 13-year-old kid seemed really interested in the Honda Civic. He even got up and went out to the front porch several times, probably to admire the car from a distance. Around 7 in the evening, I was sitting in the living room talking to Uncle Harold about the real estate market when suddenly, a blood-curdling scream rang out from the yard outside. That scream was Anna's. My heart felt like it stopped beating in that moment. I jumped out of my chair and ran toward the front door. My wife, Sarah, ran right behind me. The other guests also rushed outside to see what was happening. When I ran out to the yard, the scene in front of me made me freeze like someone had slapped me across the face. Anna's Honda Civic had been completely smashed up. The windshield was shattered. The hood was dented with deep gouges. Both headlights were broken entirely, and the shiny silver paint was now covered with long scratches. And Anna, my daughter, was standing there sobbing next to the car. Her whole body was shaking with fear and anger. As soon as she saw me, Anna ran toward me, crying, her voice choking and broken. "Dad, Dad, my car got smashed, Dad." Seeing my daughter crying, I ran over to Anna and hugged her tight. She sobbed on my shoulder, her whole body trembling. I tried to keep my voice calm, even though my blood was boiling, asking my daughter, "Who did this? Tell me." Anna looked up at me, her eyes red from crying. She pointed toward Brian and Alex, who were standing a few meters away. Her voice was both angry and pained. "Uncle Brian and Alex smashed my car, Dad. They smashed my car right in front of me." Hearing Anna's words, I let go of Anna, turned around, and charged straight at Brian with uncontrollable rage. As soon as I got close to Brian, I grabbed his collar tight and pulled him toward me. My face was only inches from his, and I roared with a voice full of hatred. "Why? Why did you do that? Are you crazy, Brian?" Brian was caught off guard by my action. He tried to struggle, but I held tight and wouldn't let go. His eyes showed panic for a moment, but right after that, he regained his composure and pushed my hands away with a face full of fake outrage. He kept yelling, "Let me go! What's wrong with you? Why are you touching me?" Relatives quickly rushed in to break it up. Uncle Harold and a neighbor pulled me away, while Aunt Linda helped Brian stand up straight again. The atmosphere was suffocatingly tense. In the middle of that chaos, my dad stepped out from the crowd. His face was stern, his sharp eyes sweeping over each person. He stood between Brian and me, his voice deep and authoritative. He asked loudly, "What's going on here? Someone explain this to me." Brian immediately spoke up first. He said in a voice full of false victimhood, pointing at Anna, "You should ask that Anna girl over there. She's being selfish with the family. She even insulted and challenged Alex and me." Hearing Brian say that, I was so angry I wanted to rush over and punch him right then and there. But Uncle Harold was still holding my arms tight, not letting me move. I gritted my teeth and shot back at Brian. "You're lying. My daughter would never insult and challenge people." At that moment, Anna was standing next to my wife. She was crying and shaking her head, her voice choked but determined. "That's not what happened, Grandpa. I never insulted or challenged anyone. I just refused to let Alex borrow the car because Alex is only 13, not old enough to drive legally." Hearing Anna say that, Brian laughed mockingly. He turned to look at my dad with a face like he was the victim and continued, "See, Dad, this girl is really spoiled and needs a lesson. She even dares to talk back to adults." Right after Brian finished talking, my mom suddenly yelled, "Enough!" Everyone went silent and turned to look at her. My mom is a small, gentle woman who rarely raises her voice, but when she did speak up, no one dared to argue back. Then Mom turned to look at my dad, her voice calm but firm. "David, go check the camera. See who's telling the truth and who's lying." As soon as he heard Mom mention the camera, Brian's face turned completely red. He turned to look at Mom, his voice stuttering and shaky as he asked, "Camera? What camera? Didn't you say the camera was broken?" My mom looked at Brian, her eyes cold as ice. She nodded slowly and replied in a calm voice, "That's right, it was broken. But I had someone fix it a week ago." Brian stammered, his voice trembling as he asked, Why didn't you tell me?" My mom crossed her arms, raised an eyebrow at Brian, and asked directly, "Why should I tell you? Do you want to control me? Or do you want me to report to you about the color of my poop every time I use the bathroom?" Mom's words made the guests burst out laughing, even though the situation was tense. A few people tried to cover their mouths, but the laughter still escaped. And Brian just stood there like a statue, his face pale white, unable to say a word. After receiving Mom's command, Dad said nothing more. He started opening the camera app and pulled up the video from the security camera. Everyone went silent and focused on the screen. The atmosphere was so tense I could hear my own heart pounding. The video started playing. The image appeared clearly under the front porch light. In the video, Brian was standing looking at Anna's Honda Civic with an unreadable expression. Alex was walking around the car, touching every detail, from the door handles to the rearview mirrors. The kid even opened the car door and sat in the driver's seat, both hands gripping the steering wheel, an excited look on his face. Then Anna walked over, her voice polite but firm. "Alex, get out of the car. I don't like people sitting in my car without permission." Alex didn't bother listening. The kid turned to look at Anna and said in a commanding voice, "Give me the keys. I want to drive around the block." Hearing that unreasonable request, Anna shook her head and replied, "No way, Alex. You're only 13, you don't have a license. By law, you're not allowed to drive." At this point in the video, Brian stepped closer. He looked at Anna with an annoyed expression, his voice somewhat harsh when he said, "Anna, let Alex borrow it. He knows how to drive. He'll drive around this neighborhood. Nothing dangerous." Even though Brian had spoken up to ask, Anna still held her ground. She looked straight into Brian's eyes and replied, "No, Uncle Brian. By law, Alex isn't old enough to drive. I can't lend it to him. I'm sorry, but the answer is still no." When Brian heard that answer, he stepped closer to Anna, his eyes becoming cold and threatening. He spoke like giving an order, his voice dropping low and menacing. "Anna, I'm telling you for the last time, give Alex the keys. If you don't blame me." Facing Brian's threat, Anna stepped back, but still didn't show fear. She lifted her head high and replied, her voice ringing out clearly, "Are you threatening me? I said no means no. Whatever you say, I won't change my mind." Right after that statement, Brian lunged toward Anna with a fierce look, but she was quicker, running to another corner to stand, away from the car. Brian then yelled with a voice full of rage, "You dare to run? Fine." After saying that, he looked around. Then his eyes stopped at a large rock lying by the flower bed. He bent down, picked up the rock, and walked over to the car with a terrifying expression. He raised the rock and smashed it hard into the windshield. The sound of breaking glass rang out piercingly. Alex also jumped in. The kid yelled with crazy excitement, "Smash it, Dad! Show her who's boss!" The kid used another rock to hit the car body, scratching the paint with a look of twisted pleasure. The father and son duo, Brian and Alex, worked together to destroy Anna's car while she stood crying and screaming in the corner of the yard, her voice desperate. "Stop it! Please stop!" Right after that came the image of all of us arriving. After watching that video, the atmosphere was suffocatingly silent. Everyone was shocked by what they had just witnessed. Brian and Alex stood motionless, their faces pale as wax figures. Lisa, Brian's wife, also stood next to her husband, her expression panicked. She didn't dare look anyone in the eye. I turned to look at Anna. My daughter was crying in my wife's arms, her whole body trembling from the painful memories that had just been replayed. After watching the video, my wife Sarah was the first to speak up. She took out her phone, her voice cold as she said, "I'm calling the police right now. This is property destruction, it can't be overlooked." At that moment, my dad raised his hand to signal everyone to stop. He turned to look at Sarah, his voice calm but full of authority. "Sarah, hold off on calling the police. Let me handle this first." Sarah looked at my dad, then looked at me with doubtful eyes. I nodded slightly, signaling for her to agree. Even though I was furious, I still wanted to see how Dad would handle this. Sarah reluctantly nodded and put her phone away. She said with a firm voice, "I agree. But I'm only waiting 30 minutes. If there's no satisfactory result, I'm calling the police immediately." My dad nodded, then turned to look at Brian and slowly said, "Brian, I'm only saying this once. You and Alex apologize to Anna right now. After that, you pay $30,000 in damages." Brian was stunned after hearing that. His eyes widened, and he stammered with a voice full of outrage. $30,000? What are you saying? That car would only cost about $3,000 to fix. Are you trying to rip me off? My dad didn't budge at all. He asked Brian back with a voice cold as ice. What about compensation for emotional damages? Do you think my granddaughter being threatened and watching her car get smashed in front of her face wouldn't affect her psychologically? Do you think repair money is enough? Brian still wouldn't give in. He tried to regain his composure, then said, family should forgive each other. Why calculate every little detail over something so small? After that statement, my dad silently looked at Brian for a long time. His eyes didn't waver at all in front of Brian's excuses. Then he nodded slowly, his voice unusually calm when he replied, fine. No one understood what Dad was planning to do. Brian breathed a sigh of relief, thinking Dad had accepted his excuse. He turned to look at Lisa with a triumphant expression, as he had just won a battle. But he was dead wrong. After saying that, my dad turned and walked into the house. No one knew what he was planning to do. I watched his figure disappear behind the door, a strange feeling rising in my chest. About 2 minutes later, Dad stepped out, and in his hand was a large sledgehammer, the kind that requires both hands to lift. The hammer hung heavy in his grip, but his steps were still steady. All the guests fell silent when they saw the hammer in my dad's hand. No one dared to breathe loudly. A few people automatically stepped back. Dad walked slowly, each step firm on the yard ground. His eyes were sharp as knives, not a trace of emotion on his face. Suddenly, he stopped in the middle of the yard and turned to look at the relatives standing around. Then he said loudly, hold Brian, his wife, and Alex for me. Don't let them run. Right after Dad finished speaking, Uncle Harold and several other men stepped forward to hold Brian, Lisa, and Alex tight. At that moment, Brian truly started to panic. He struggled and yelled, Dad, what are you planning to do? Let me go. Everyone, let me go. But my dad didn't bother answering. He walked straight toward Brian's new Mercedes, the car he had just bought a few months ago for nearly $70,000, and bragged about it to all his relatives. When standing in front of the Mercedes, my dad raised the sledgehammer high. Then he swung it down. The sound of metal clashing rang out piercingly, tearing through the quiet Christmas night air. The Mercedes hood was dented with a deep crater. After Dad's action, Brian screamed like a wounded animal. No, my car. Stop, Dad. Are you crazy? Lisa also shrieked, her voice shrill and ear-piercing. Dad, please stop. That car cost $70,000. What are you doing? And Alex yelled, Grandpa, don't smash the car anymore. But my dad didn't stop. He continued swinging the hammer with incredible strength. He hit the car doors, the headlights, everything within reach. Each hammer blow was like a judgment for Brian's actions. The sound of metal breaking, glass shattering, Brian screaming, all mixing into chaotic music on Christmas night. 10 minutes later, the luxurious Mercedes had turned into an unrecognizable pile of scrap metal. Glass shattered, body dented, headlights destroyed. The $70,000 car was now just a pile of junk. Brian nearly collapsed in the arms of the relatives holding him. He screamed with a desperate and furious voice, Dad, why did you do that? My car. Why did you smash my car? At that moment, my dad stepped closer to Brian, his voice terrifyingly calm, each word like a nail hammered into his heart. Family should forgive each other. You said that yourself. Brian stood there trembling. He screamed with a voice full of hatred. You think you're done after doing that? I'll call the police. You destroyed my property. My car cost 5 times as much as that girl's car. You'll have to pay. My dad didn't seem worried at all. He smiled lightly with a mocking expression, his voice sarcastically replying, Oh, why are you being so selfish? Calculating with your own father? You just said family should forgive each other. Why are you changing your tune so fast? Brian was speechless after that statement. He opened his mouth to say something, but couldn't get any words out. My dad continued speaking in a calm voice. Besides, I didn't destroy your car. Who's going to testify to that? Brian's eyes widened, and he pointed at the guests standing around, his voice almost screaming. Everyone saw it. 20 people here all saw you smash my car. Right after Brian finished talking, My dad turned to look at the relatives with meaningful eyes. He asked in a calm voice, "Did everyone see me smash the car?" Uncle Harold was the first to speak up, shaking his head with a fake innocent expression. "I didn't see anything. I was busy looking somewhere else." Aunt Linda also nodded in agreement, her voice low, "Me too. I only saw Brian smashing his own car. He must be having a breakdown." The other guests also spoke up one by one. Their voices rang out in succession. "I didn't see anything, Mr." David was standing still in one spot. Brian was smashing his own car. He must have a mental illness. Brian went pale at the betrayal of those around him. He turned to look at Lisa, his voice desperate. "Honey, you saw it. You testify for me." Lisa stood there trembling. She looked at her husband, then at her father-in-law, then at the relatives who were looking at her with warning eyes. Finally, she lowered her head and stayed silent. At that moment, my dad stepped closer to Brian, his voice dropping low, each word like an axe blow. "Oh, and my camera just broke too. What a coincidence." Brian stood there like a statue, his face pale as paper. He knew he had lost and lost entirely. After everything had settled down, my dad walked over to Anna. Dad put his hand on Anna's shoulder, his voice full of love when he said, "Anna, I'm sorry. I should have protected you better." Anna looked up at Grandpa. She shook her head and said with a choked voice, "It's not your fault, Grandpa. I thank you for standing up for me." My dad smiled and said to Anna, "I'm going to buy you another car. $20,000, you pick whatever car you like. As for that old car, we'll sell it to a used car lot for whatever we can get. Deal?" Anna's eyes widened in surprise. She looked at Grandpa, then looked at me as if asking for permission. I nodded to my daughter, signaling agreement. Anna hugged Grandpa tightly, her voice breaking with happiness and emotion. "Thank you, Grandpa. Thank you so much." My dad patted his granddaughter's head, his eyes gentle but still tinged with sadness. Standing a few meters away, Brian witnessed that scene. He stammered and asked Dad, "What about my car? You're buying her a car but not compensating me for mine?" My dad turned to look at Brian, his voice curt, without a trace of sympathy, as he replied, "Fix it yourself." Brian was speechless, unable to believe what he had just heard. He stammered, his voice full of indignation. "Dad, you're playing favorites. You're giving your granddaughter $20,000 but telling me to fix my own car?" My dad stepped closer to Brian, standing face to face with him. He asked, "Playing favorites, how? Anna is my granddaughter, so giving her money is the right thing to do. As for you, you're just an outsider who happens to share DNA with me." Brian stepped back like someone had punched him in the chest. His face completely changed color. My dad continued speaking in a cold voice. "The moment you lied and refused to apologize and compensate Anna, you stopped being my son. You cut off our father-son relationship with your own hands." The atmosphere was suffocatingly silent. Everyone stood there. No one dared to say a word. Brian stood there trembling, his eyes red with anger and humiliation. He took a deep breath, tried to regain his composure, then gritted his teeth at my dad, his voice full of threats. "Fine. Suppose that's what you want. Fine. I'll sue you for property destruction. My car was worth $70,000, 5 times more than that girl's car. You'll have to compensate for everything plus damages for emotional distress. You think you can bully me?" After Brian's words, my dad looked at Brian and burst out laughing mockingly, his voice sarcastic. "Oh, why are you being so selfish? Calculating with your own father. You just said family should forgive each other. Why do you want to sue me now?" Brian gritted his teeth and yelled, "This is different. You destroyed my property. I have the right to demand compensation." My dad nodded slowly, his voice calm like he was talking about the weather. "Yeah, go ahead and sue. But remember, I also have that video of you and Alex smashing Anna's car. Do you want me to put it on social media?" Brian went pale when he heard this. He stammered, You wouldn't dare." Immediately, my dad cut him off, his voice cold as ice. "Your customers will be pleased to see you threatening a 16-year-old kid and smashing her car just because she wouldn't let your son borrow it. Your customers will be really impressed." Brian stood there like he'd been struck by lightning. His face was pale white, his hands trembling. He knew if that video went viral, his reputation would be destroyed. His electronics store would lose customers, and the career he'd built all these years would collapse. At that moment, Lisa stepped next to her husband. She pulled Brian's arm and whispered in his ear with a panicked voice, "Let's go, honey. Don't make this bigger. Let's go home." Brian looked at his wife, then at my dad, then at the relatives standing around with cold eyes. He knew he had failed. His voice full of hatred, he said, "Fine. I'll never come back to this house again. Consider that you don't have me as a son. From now on, we cut off our relationship." My dad looked at Brian, his face devoid of emotion. He nodded slowly and replied in a cold voice, "Good. I've been waiting for you to say that for a long time. But remember, don't come back here crying and begging later. This door is closed to you forever." Brian gritted his teeth. He turned to look at me with eyes full of hatred, growling, "Daniel, don't expect me to forgive you either. You and your daughter will pay for what happened today." At that moment, I looked straight into Brian's eyes and replied, "I don't need your forgiveness. And if you dare touch my daughter one more time, I won't just call the police." Brian opened his mouth to say something, but Lisa had already pulled him away. She turned to call Alex with an urgent voice. "Alex, follow me. We're leaving right now." Alex hurried after his parents. The kid didn't dare look at anyone, his head hanging low. Brian's family called a taxi and left into the cold Christmas night. His smashed Mercedes still lay there as a reminder of what had happened. After Brian and his family left, the atmosphere at the party gradually returned to normal. My mom walked over to Anna. She hugged her granddaughter and whispered in her ear with a voice full of love, "My granddaughter is so good. You did the right thing. Don't be sad anymore." Anna nodded and hugged Grandma tight, her voice soft, "Thank you, Grandma." A few seconds later, my dad signaled for everyone to continue the party. He said in a calm voice, "All right, it's over now. Everyone keep eating and drinking. Today is Christmas night. Don't let unpleasant things ruin the party." Although the atmosphere was still a bit tense, people gradually returned to the party. Laughter and conversation began to ring out again, though not as lively as before. At that moment, I walked over to Dad, put my hand on his shoulder, and said with a grateful voice, "Thank you, Dad." My dad looked at me, his eyes gentle but still tinged with sadness. He sighed and said to me, "I failed in raising Brian. He became like that partly because of my mistakes, but I couldn't let him hurt my granddaughter." I nodded, an indescribable emotion rising in my heart. I understood what a difficult decision Dad had to make. Giving up your own child is never easy, no matter how terrible that child might be. 3 days after that Christmas party, my dad drove a dark blue 2022 Honda Civic to my house in Sacramento. That day, Anna was sitting in the living room doing homework when she heard the doorbell. She ran to open the door and froze when she saw Grandpa standing there, holding the car keys. Seeing Anna, my dad smiled and said, "Here's your new car. Promised, didn't I? Go take a look." Anna screamed with joy. She ran to the yard and looked at the new car with bright eyes. She turned back to hug Grandpa tight, her voice choked with emotion. "Thank you, Grandpa. Thank you so much. I'll take really good care of it." My dad patted his granddaughter's head and said, "I know you will. You're a good kid. I'm proud of you." After that, Dad came inside to sit and have tea with Sarah and me. He told us that Brian had sent people to tow away the wrecked Mercedes the day before. Dad sighed and said to me, his voice full of weariness, "He didn't say a word to Mom and me, just sent people to get the car and left. Your mom is despondent, but she understands this was the right decision." I nodded and asked Dad, "Do you regret it?" Dad was silent for a long time. Then he slowly shook his head and replied, "No, I don't regret protecting my granddaughter. I only regret not raising Brian better when he was young. If I had been stricter, maybe he wouldn't have become like this." I didn't know what to say, so I just put my hand on Dad's shoulder as a way of comfort. 2 years have passed since that fateful Christmas night. Brian has never returned to my parents' house. He kept his promise, or maybe it was a threat, that he would never set foot here again. Alex, Brian's son, also doesn't visit his grandparents. The kid is now 15, but he's never shown up for any family occasions. In fact, when my mom accidentally ran into Alex at the supermarket a few months ago, She walked over to say hi. But the kid just looked at her with cold eyes and said with a contemptuous voice, "You're not my grandma. Don't claim to be." My mom stood there, as if someone had slapped her across the face. She silently watched Alex turn his back and walk away, her eyes red but not shedding a single tear. When Mom told me about this, her voice was calm, but I could feel the deep pain in her heart. She sighed and said to me, "I don't blame him. He's still young, being raised by his parents like that. What does he know? I feel sorry for him." I didn't know how to comfort Mom. I could only say, "Don't be sad, Mom. You still have Anna and me." Mom nodded and smiled at me, but I knew that smile was hiding a pain that couldn't heal. Looking back on the journey of the past 2 years, I've learned 5 important lessons. Lesson 1. Teach children to say no and protect their boundaries. Never let pressure from family or society force you or your children to do wrong things. Lesson 2. Excessive spoiling creates spoiled children. Teach kids that they can't have everything they want, and being told no is a regular part of life. Lesson 3. Never let the word family become an excuse for others to bully you. A real family isn't a place where people can hurt each other without consequences. Family love must be based on mutual respect. Lesson 4. Actions speak louder than words. Sometimes you have to make difficult decisions to protect the people you love. The final lesson. The consequences of bad actions will follow you for life. Think carefully before you act because you can't turn back time. My family's current life is pretty peaceful. Anna is now 18 and getting ready for college. She still drives the Honda Civic that Grandpa gave her, and every time she mentions the car, she remembers Grandpa with deep gratitude. My parents still live in the house in Stockton. They're still healthy, though sometimes I can see sadness flash in their eyes when someone accidentally mentions Brian. As for Brian, he's still in Modesto running his electronics store. We don't stay in touch anymore, and probably never will again. Even though many people supported us, some still criticized my family. They said Anna was too selfish, and that's what led to the family drama. They told my dad played favorites with Anna. What do you think about that perspective? Leave your thoughts in the comments below this story. Thank you for following this long story. If this story touched your emotions, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit like, and share the story with people around you. See you again in the following stories. At my dad's 70th birthday party, the unthinkable happened. Without asking why, without trying to figure out who was right or wrong, my dad walked up to my 12-year-old daughter. Then he raised his hand, and he slapped her. The slap was so hard it made my daughter stumble, almost falling to the ground. The sound of his hand hitting her face echoed through the deadly silent room. In that moment, I knew everything had changed. Family relationships, trust in my parents, everything shattered with that slap. And this was just the beginning of a family storm. Before I tell you what happened that day, thank you for choosing my story today. Hello everyone, I'm Alan, 43 years old, living in Tucson, Arizona. The story I'm telling you today happened in August 2023, right at my dad's 70th birthday party. That birthday party was a special milestone, so my dad invited nearly 40 people. Almost half of them were his old military buddies from his service. My dad had 40 years of military service. He retired as a colonel, and even now, his word is still law in the family. Nobody's allowed to argue back. Nobody's allowed to ask questions. And especially, nobody's allowed to make him lose face. But he's not a fair man. He's always favored my older brother, Harold. All because Harold's more intelligent than me, more talented than me, and most importantly, Harold always knows how to please him. Since we were kids, Harold was the perfect son in our parents' eyes. Excellent grades, team captain of the school football team, graduated from law school with honors. And me? I was just the faded shadow standing behind my brother's spotlight. When we grew up, that favoritism never changed. If anything, it became clearer, more painful. Harold has a good job and owns his own company in Phoenix with over 20 employees. He lives in a 2-story mansion in the fancy Scottsdale area, drives the latest Mercedes, and every time he visits mom and dad, he brings stories about million-dollar contracts. And me? I'm just a truck driver. Every day, I put on my dark blue uniform with the company logo on the back, sit in a truck cabin for 12 hours or more, hauling freight across the Arizona desert. Because of that, Harold keeps becoming mom and dad's pride, while I slowly became the disappointment they don't want to mention. I drive long-haul trucks for a big transportation company in Tucson. The job's not glamorous, no air-conditioned office or personal secretary, but this work gives me enough money to support my little family. My wife's name is Diane. She's a nurse at a small hospital near our house. We met 18 years ago when I ended up in the ER after a minor accident on a delivery route. She was the one who bandaged my wounds, and ever since, she's also been the one healing the invisible wounds in my heart. Honestly, I don't love my driving job at all. Those trips sometimes last almost 2 weeks, and missing my wife and daughter nearly drives me crazy. But to have money for my little family, I have to accept the trade-off. Even though work's tough, I have a family that loves me, especially my daughter. My daughter's name is Alina. To me, she's my whole world. Because our family struggles financially, she's very understanding and more mature than other kids her age. She never asks for expensive things, never complains about wearing hand-me-downs, and always tries her best in school to make me happy. Every day, no matter where I am on those interstate highways, she calls me at 9 p.m. to check on my health, reminds me to drive carefully and eat enough. Those short calls are what keep me going through the long, lonely nights on the road. I thought that even though my dad favored Harold over me, he'd be fair with his grandchildren. But no, I was wrong. He carried his favoritism into the next generation. Mateo, Harold's son, is always the golden grandchild in his eyes. At every family gathering, he only cares about Mateo, asks how Mateo's doing in school, and praises how brilliant Mateo is. And Alina, my daughter, is like a ghost in her own grandparents' house. And then 2 years ago, on his 70th birthday, he publicly hurt my daughter in a way that I still can't forget. To help you understand why I brought my family to that party, could you tell me about a phone call from my dad a week before? It was Tuesday, around 11 a.m. As soon as the call connected, my dad's authoritative voice came through. "Alan, next week's my 70th birthday. I want you to bring your wife and kid to the party." I replied, "Dad, I've got a hall that week. I'm not sure I can arrange it." My dad didn't care about that. His cold voice came through the phone. "I don't care what hall you've got. This is my 70th birthday, an important occasion. I don't want your absence embarrassing me in front of my friends and comrades." Hearing that, my heart felt like someone was squeezing it. He wanted me there to save face, so nobody would ask why his younger son was missing on his important day. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, trying to hold back the anger rising, and answered in a dry voice, "I'll try, but I can't promise anything." My dad was silent for a few seconds. Then he said through gritted teeth, "If your family doesn't show up at the party, then we're no longer father and son." Before I could say anything else, the dial tone came on. He'd hung up on me. Around 2 p.m. that day, when I just stopped at a gas station to rest and grab lunch, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Diane, my wife. My wife's voice had a hint of worry when she said, "Alan, Mom just came to our house. She came to convince us to attend Dad's birthday party. She said Dad was really sad when you refused, and she hopes our family will reconsider." After mulling it over, I sighed and told Diane, "All right, fine. We'll go to the party. I'll try to get that day off." Back then, I had no idea that the decision to attend Dad's birthday party would completely change our family relationships. I had no idea that my daughter would be hurt in a way no father could ever accept. Exactly a week after Dad's call, my whole family hit the road to my parents' house. Luckily, the party fell on a day I had off, so I didn't have to ask for time off or switch shifts with anyone. The drive from Tucson to my parents' house in the Phoenix suburbs took about 2 hours. Alina was 12 that year, And the whole way there, she was excited nonstop. She sat in the back seat, clutching a gift box carefully wrapped in blue paper with a silver bow. It was a neck scarf. Around 5 p.m., we arrived at my parents' house. My parents' house was in a quiet residential area in the Phoenix suburbs. As soon as we walked through the door, I saw Harold. My older brother was standing in the living room, one hand holding a wine glass, the other arm around a man I recognized as one of Dad's old friends. Next to him were his wife, Melissa, and their son Mateo, who was 13 that year. As soon as Harold saw me, he walked over with his familiar half-smile. That smile I'd seen 1,000 times. The smile of a winner looking down at the loser. He looked me up and down at my casual clothes, then dropped a line with a sarcastic tone. "Oh, Alan, you made it? I thought you were still busy driving trucks somewhere. How's work these days? Still sleeping in your truck cabin like a homeless person?" Those words cut into my self-respect like a knife. I clenched my fists. Diane stood next to me and gently touched my arm, as if to remind me to stay calm. I took a deep breath, swallowed my anger, and replied as calmly as possible. "Work's fine. Thanks for asking." Harold snorted and walked away, like I wasn't worth any more of his time. I stood there for a few seconds, trying to calm my emotions, then found a seat in the corner of the living room. Dad was in the backyard, talking with some old comrades. Mom was busy in the kitchen with other women. None of them came to greet us, as if my family's presence wasn't worth noticing. Alina sat down next to me, still clutching the gift box. Her eyes looked around the room, searching for Grandpa. I saw the excitement in her eyes slowly turn to disappointment when she realized Grandpa didn't care that she'd arrived. Around 5:30, while everyone was still waiting for the last guests to arrive, a shout suddenly came from the front porch. It was Mateo's voice. The boy yelled, "Help me! Someone help me! This crazy girl is hitting me!" My heart skipped a beat. I rushed to the front porch along with dozens of others, and the scene in front of me left me stunned. Alina, my daughter, was sitting on top of Mateo's back. Mateo was lying face down on the ground, his face pressed into the grass, both arms locked behind his back by Alina. My daughter had used what she'd learned in martial arts class to restrain her cousin, who was a head taller than her. Mateo was still screaming, his voice shrill. "Let me go! Let me go right now! She's crazy!" Everyone crowded around, and I heard my parents and Harold shouting. Harold yelled angrily, "Alina, let go of my son right now." My mom cried out worriedly, "Oh my God, what are you doing? Let Mateo go." Alina didn't budge. My daughter sat steady, face cold as ice. She looked up at the adults surrounding her, her eyes showing no fear. My dad pushed through the crowd, his face red with rage. He stood in front of Alina and roared, "Alina, get up right now. Do you hear me?" Alina still didn't move. Then I stepped up to my daughter, put my hand on her shoulder and said gently, "Alina, let Mateo go, sweetheart. I'm here." Hearing my voice, Alina turned to look at me. In her eyes, I saw anger, frustration, and hurt, but she listened to me. She slowly stood up and stepped back toward me. Freed, Mateo immediately jumped up. The boy ran to hide behind Harold, his face pale, his clothes dirty with grass and dirt. He played the victim perfectly, his voice trembling. "Dad, I didn't do anything, and she hit me. She's crazy, Dad." Harold hugged his son, his eyes shooting hateful glares at Alina. And then, the unthinkable happened. Without asking why, without trying to figure out who was right or wrong, my dad walked up to Alina. Then he raised his hand, and he slapped my daughter. The slap was so hard it made Alina stumble, almost falling to the ground. The sound of his hand hitting my daughter's face echoed through the deadly silent space. I stood there, stunned for a moment, unable to believe what I'd just witnessed. My dad looked at Alina, saying through gritted teeth, "You dare hit your cousin? You dare embarrass me in front of my friends and comrades?" My blood boiled. All the restraint, all the patience over so many years exploded in that moment. I lunged toward my dad, shouting, "Don't you touch my daughter!" But before I could reach him, he'd already turned around. My dad, a former officer with 40 years in the military, still had terrifying speed and strength. With just one punch to my gut, he doubled me over and sent me crashing to the ground. Pain spread through my whole body. I tried to get up but couldn't. My dad's old comrades rushed to hold him back, while some relatives came over to help me up. Diane, my wife, stood frozen for a few seconds, as if paralyzed. Then she rushed over to hug Alina, protecting her in her arms. Alina didn't cry. My 12-year-old daughter didn't shed a single tear after that slap. She stood straight, her cheek red and swollen, but her eyes looked straight into her grandfather's face. In those eyes, I saw resentment, defiance, and deep disappointment. In that moment, I knew everything had changed. Family relationships, trust in my parents, everything shattered with that slap. And this was just the beginning of a family storm. After his comrades held back my dad, Alina walked up to him. Her voice rang out clear and bold, not trembling at all when she asked, "Why did Grandpa hit me?" "Mateo's the wrong one. He insulted my dad." My dad was startled by the little girl's calmness, but he quickly regained his authoritative composure. He roared, "Even if he insulted your dad, you still can't hit him." Alina wouldn't back down. She yelled in my dad's face, her voice full of indignation. "Mateo was the one who hit me first." That statement was like a bomb exploding in the crowd. Everyone went silent. The whispers gradually died out. All eyes turned to Mateo, who was hiding behind his dad, pale-faced. I'd managed to stand up by then, though my stomach still ached from Dad's punch. I stepped next to my daughter, put my hand on her shoulder so she'd know she wasn't alone. My wife looked at me, then she turned and walked into the house. Seeing my wife leave, I felt a bit disappointed. She should have been here with me, protecting our daughter. At the time, I had no idea that Diane had gone inside with a different purpose. After Alina fought back, my dad thought for almost a full minute. Finally, he said through gritted teeth to Alina, "Even if Mateo hit you first, you don't have the right to hit him back. You should have told me, and I would have handled it." Alina was about to open her mouth to argue, but I stopped her. I stepped forward, standing in front of my daughter like a protective shield, and told her, "You were courageous. Let me handle the rest." Alina nodded and stepped back, letting me deal with everything. Then I turned to face my dad, my voice ringing out, "You said my daughter doesn't have the right to hit Mateo? Is it because Mateo's your golden grandson?" My dad was so angry that his face turned bright red. He yelled, his voice echoing across the yard, "You disrespectful brat. How dare you talk to your father like that?" After saying that, he wanted to charge again, but his comrades quickly held him back. They gripped his arms tightly, telling him to calm down. My mom also stepped in, looking at me with reproachful eyes and saying resentfully, "Alan, how can you talk to your father like that? Your dad's 70 years old, you need to respect him. He's a colonel." Harold wouldn't stay quiet either. He stepped up and chimed in, "Alan, you should teach your daughter some manners." I laughed loudly after what they said. The laughter rang out in the silence, making everyone look at me like I'd lost my mind. But I wasn't crazy. I was laughing at the irony, at the injustice I'd endured for so many years. After a while, I stopped laughing and looked straight into my dad's eyes. I told him, "All these years, you've always favored Harold. You gave him everything while I was just the spare son. I accepted that because I thought at least you'd be fair with your grandchildren. But no, you kept favoring Mateo, ignoring Alina as if she didn't exist. And today, when my daughter just defended herself against a cousin who hit her first, you slapped my daughter in front of 40 people?" Whispers rose in the crowd. I saw some of Dad's old comrades exchanging glances, some shaking their heads. Right after that, my dad roared, "Shut up! You don't get to talk about me like that. Get out of my house right now." Just then, Diane stepped out from inside the house. She stood next to me, face cold as ice, and declared firmly, "We're not going anywhere. The police are coming. I already called them." Diane's words were like a second bomb exploding at the party. My dad froze. My mom opened her mouth, wanting to say something. Harold's face went pale. My mom was the first to regain her composure. She rushed up to Diane, her voice shrill. "How dare you call the police? This is family business. How dare you bring outsiders into this?" Harold wouldn't back down either. He stepped forward and yelled in Diane's face, "Who do you think you are to call the police? You want to destroy this family?" Diane didn't flinch. She stood straight, her cold eyes looking directly at them, and said through gritted teeth, "Shut up, you toxic people. If it weren't for the law, I'd put you scumbags 6 feet under for daring to hit my daughter." I'd never seen Diane like that. She's always been gentle, mild-mannered, always trying to make peace whenever there's family conflict. But today, when our daughter was hit, a mother's instinct turned her into a tigress protecting her cub. My parents kept cursing with ugly words, but we didn't care anymore. While everyone was still arguing, a patrol car stopped in front of my parents' house. 2 police officers got out and walked in. They observed the crowd gathered there. Then the older officer spoke up. "We received a call about violence. What's happening here?" My dad, with the instincts of a former officer, immediately stepped forward. He tried to regain his composure and authority, replying, "Officers, it's just a small family matter. My granddaughter was being naughty and hit her cousin. I just disciplined her a little. Nothing serious." Right after that, my mom said convincingly, "That's right, officer. Just kids fighting. My husband only intervened to make them stop." Harold nodded and added, "That girl attacked my son. He's the victim. My dad was protecting him." Mateo also played the victim perfectly. The boy said with a trembling voice, "I didn't do anything, and she hit me. I was so scared." The older officer looked around, his sharp eyes observing each person. Then he saw Alina, standing next to my wife with her cheek still red and swollen. He walked closer to Alina and asked gently, "What happened to your cheek?" Before Alina could answer, I spoke up. "My dad slapped my daughter. She's only 12 years old." The officer turned to look at me, then at my dad. The atmosphere was suffocating with tension. The younger officer started taking statements from those present. My parents, Harold and Mateo, all testified that Alina attacked first, and my dad only intervened to protect Mateo. The slap was to discipline his granddaughter. I listened to those statements and felt sick. They were all lying to protect each other, not caring about truth or justice. The older officer looked around, then stopped at the corner of the porch. He pointed to a security camera mounted on the wall and asked my dad, "Does this camera work?" My dad froze for a moment, then quickly replied, "That camera's broken. It hasn't worked in a long time." Hearing Dad lie, I stepped up and told the police, "He's lying. That camera works fine." My dad's very careful about security. He never leaves any equipment in the house broken without fixing it immediately. The officer looked at my dad, then at me. He said authoritatively, "I suggest you provide the video from the security camera. You're concealing evidence, which is obstruction of justice." My dad stood still as a statue. Finally, after a minute of silence, he sighed and reluctantly led the officer inside. About 10 minutes later, the officer came back out with an iPad in hand. He set it on the porch table and played the security camera video. Everyone crowded around to watch. The video clearly showed everything that happened. Mateo was the first to speak, mocking me in front of Alina, calling me a pathetic, poor driver, the shame of the Miller family. When Alina fought back, Mateo rushed over and pushed my daughter to the ground. The boy was about to hit her more, but Alina quickly defended herself, using skills learned from martial arts class to restrain her cousin. And then, the video showed my dad walking up and slapping Alina. The slap was so hard my daughter stumbled and almost fell. When the video ended, nobody said anything. The truth was clear. At this point, my dad still tried to argue, his voice ringing out stubbornly. "Alina assaulted Mateo. Alina knows martial arts, and that's not fair." A few people in the crowd of guests snorted at that ridiculous defense. One man, who seemed to be my dad's old comrade, shook his head and sighed. After a while, I walked up to the officer and asked, "Officer, can I get a copy of this video as evidence?" The officer nodded in agreement. After finishing gathering evidence, the officer turned around and declared to my dad, "You're under arrest for assault on a minor. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in court." Then he pulled out handcuffs. The cold sound of metal clicking echoed as the cuffs locked around my dad's wrists. Before leaving, the officer turned back to tell me, "This case will be referred to Child Protective Services. They'll contact your family to ensure your daughter's rights." I nodded, gripping Diane's and Alina's hands tightly. My dad's 70th birthday party ended right then and there. My mom and Harold stood watching the car drive away. then turned back to look at me with hateful eyes. My mom gritted her teeth and said, "You destroyed this family, Alan. Are you happy now?" I looked straight into her eyes, no longer afraid, no longer patient like before. My voice rang out clear and final. "From now on, I'm no longer your son." Then I turned around and led my wife and daughter out of that house. After leaving my parents' house, I didn't take my family straight home. Instead, I drove directly to the nearest hospital. Alina sat in the back seat, silently looking out the window. Her cheek was still swollen and red, and I could see bruising starting to show. My daughter, only 12 years old, had endured too much in one day. When I suggested going to the hospital, Alina turned to look at me and said with a somewhat tired voice, "Dad, I'm fine. We don't need to go to the hospital." I looked at her through the rearview mirror, my heart aching when I saw her fake calm expression. She was trying to act strong, but I knew deep down she was hurting so much. I said with an unchangeable voice, "No, we have to go to the hospital. I need medical records to protect your rights. This isn't just about surface wounds, you understand?" Finally, she nodded in agreement. After almost an hour at the hospital, I held a complete medical file in my hands. The doctor documented how my dad's slap affected my daughter's psychology, and they also recorded the external injuries, along with photos of Alina's face with the red, swollen cheek. Leaving the hospital, I took my family home. Alina went up to her room right after stepping inside. She was exhausted after a horrible day, and just a few minutes later, I heard her steady breathing coming from her bedroom. That night, I couldn't sleep. Images from the party kept replaying in my head like a broken film. Dad's slap. Everyone screaming. The hateful looks from Mom and Harold. Around 3 a.m., when the whole house was deep in sleep, I made a decision. I took out my phone, opened the video saved from the security camera, and posted it on social media. I wrote a short paragraph retelling what happened. Nothing added or taken away. No exaggeration. Just the naked truth about what happened at my dad's 70th birthday party. Then I hit post. The next morning, around 8 a.m., my doorbell rang frantically. The bell kept ringing nonstop, as if someone were trying to break down the door with sound. I opened the door and stood frozen when I saw who was there. My mom stood there, her face pale after a sleepless night. Next to her was Harold with a face full of rage. And behind them were several relatives I recognized from yesterday's party. My mom charged straight into the house before I could react, pointing her finger at my face and screaming, "Delete that video right now. Delete it." Harold also stepped in behind her. He said through gritted teeth, "Alan, do you know what you're doing? That video's spread everywhere. You're destroying the Miller family's reputation." A relative stepped forward and said in a softer voice but still full of implications, "Alan, you should reconsider. Posting a video like that isn't good for anyone. You should delete it, then clarify that it was just an act the whole family was performing together. Everything will blow over." I laughed at their ridiculous demand. A few seconds later, I looked straight into their eyes and said loudly, "You're trespassing in my house without being invited. You're threatening me. I'm recording all of this. And now, I'm calling the police." Then I dialed 911. My mom and Harold looked at each other, then at me with hateful eyes. But they knew they couldn't do anything more. They turned around and walked out of the house, not forgetting to throw back curses and threats. I stood at the door, watching them get in their car and drive away. My heart was beating fast, but my mind was strangely calm. When the police arrived, I provided them with the video I just recorded, showing my mom, brother and relatives coming to my house with insults and threats, even asking me to change my statement. After the police left, I went online and checked my social media post. Thousands of views, thousands of comments. Most people condemned my dad for slapping a 12-year-old child. Many people shared their own stories about toxic families, about children being mistreated. Among those comments, I recognized some familiar accounts. They were neighbors who lived near my parents' house. They left supportive comments, telling what they'd seen and heard. Also, that morning, an employee from Child Protective Services came to my house. They gathered information, documented Alina's health condition, and spoke privately with my daughter to ensure she wasn't seriously affected psychologically. Before leaving, the worker looked at me and said in a serious voice but not without sympathy, Mr. Miller, this will definitely be a criminal case. There will be a trial, and we'll ensure your daughter's rights are protected. I nodded, feeling relief spread through me. Finally, my family would have to face the consequences of what they'd done. Justice, though late, would still come. The trial took place 3 months after that fateful birthday party. The trial went faster than I expected. The evidence from the security camera video was too clear, nothing to argue about. My dad's lawyer tried to defend that it was disciplining his granddaughter, but the prosecutor countered with evidence of Alina's injuries and reports from Child Protective Services. Finally, the judge announced the sentence: 3 years in prison, along with $80,000 in compensation, including medical costs and psychological treatment for Alina. When the verdict was announced, my mom jumped up. She screamed with an indignant voice, "This is unfair. He's a former colonel. You can't do this." Harold also stood up in protest. He said angrily, "I'm going to appeal. This sentence is too harsh. My dad just did what any grandfather would do." The judge looked at Harold with cold eyes. Then she asked back in a calm but weighty voice, "If your son was slapped like that by someone else, would you sue?" My mom and Harold went completely silent after that statement. They sat down, their faces pale as if someone had just splashed cold water on them. My dad was led away after the trial ended. When he walked past me, he stopped for a second and looked at me. In his eyes, I didn't see regret. I only saw anger and resentment. I looked back at him, saying nothing. There was so much I wanted to say, but also so much that didn't need to be said anymore. After the trial, my parents' family and I went our separate ways. When I stepped through the courthouse door, I saw Mom and Harold standing in the parking lot, looking toward me. We looked at each other like enemies. No goodbyes. I just wanted to let you know there are no promises to meet again. Just cold silence between people who once called each other family. I turned around, leading my wife and daughter away, leaving behind a part of the past that I knew would never come back. 2 years have passed since that fateful trial. My family's life gradually stabilized again. I still work as a truck driver, but I switched to a new company with better schedules, allowing me more time at home with my wife and daughter. Alina, my daughter, is now 14 years old. She's overcome the trauma from that day, partly thanks to support from a psychologist we hired with the compensation money from the trial. As for my mom and Harold, we no longer stay in touch. I blocked their phone numbers, deleted them from all social media, and completely cut off the relationship. Those toxic relatives, the ones who stood by their side that day, I cut ties with them too. Then, about 2 weeks ago, I got a call from an unknown number. It was a lawyer informing me that my dad was in the hospital. He now has about 3 months left to live. He'd been transferred from prison to the hospital for palliative care. I sat in silence for a long time after hearing the news. The emotions in my heart were too complex to describe. Part of me felt pain because, after all, he was still my dad. But another part felt empty, like this news no longer affected me. That evening, when the whole family was sitting at dinner, I told Diane and Alina about the call. Alina stopped eating, her eyes looking at me with complexity. Then she spoke up, her voice soft but sincere. "Dad, I want to visit Grandpa." I was stunned when I heard that, and I shook my head in refusal. My voice rang out slowly but firmly. "No, Alina, I won't let you visit him." Alina looked at me with disappointed eyes. She was about to say something, but I stopped her. I continued, my voice softer. "Listen to me. I understand you want to say goodbye, but I can't let you meet the person who hit you, who never apologized to you, who never admitted he was wrong. The fact that he's dying doesn't change the truth that he hurt you." Alina was silent. A few seconds later, she nodded. She didn't say anything more, but I knew she understood. Today, I'm telling this story not to seek sympathy or condemnation. I'm telling it because I want to ask everyone a question. Was I wrong to do that? Was I too cruel not to let my daughter visit my dad one last time? Or was I right to protect her from someone who once hurt her? Please share your thoughts about this situation in the comments below. I really want to know your opinions. Through this story, I have some advice for you. First advice: don't be like me. Never take your children to family gatherings where favoritism exists. If you recognize your family has favoritism problems, protect your children by keeping your distance. Don't let your children become the next victims. Second advice: if a family member hits your child, Call 911 immediately. The law exists to protect children. My wife did the right thing by calling the police right away, and that decision helped us get justice for Alina. Third advice. As soon as your child is hit, take them to the hospital for immediate examination. Don't skip this step, no matter how minor the injury seems. Fourth advice. Learn to say no. This is the most valuable lesson I learned. Say no to unreasonable demands. Say no to toxic gatherings. Say no to people trying to control your life through family emotions. Thank you for listening to my story. If this story touched your emotions, don't forget to subscribe to our channel to support us and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our latest stories. I look forward to seeing you in the following stories.